welcome to Treasury Notes, a show dedicated to the latest news and information from the office of West Virginia State Treasurer John Perdue. I'm your host, Gina Long. With the current state of the economy, it is more important than ever to become a smart consumer. In fact, a recent survey by the nation's largest independent securities regulator shows that almost half the people asked are having trouble making ends meet. That's why the Treasurer's Office recently joined with several national, state, and local agencies to present West Virginia's very first Money Smart Week. The highlight of the week included a day-long financial literacy and education summit. Coming up this half hour, we will have more from that summit. We'll also sit down with the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA's, president of Investor Education Foundation. He has some great insight into some of the best ways to outsmart investment fraud. That's all coming up in just a little bit. But first, one of the events that helped kick off Money Smart Week West Virginia was Treasurer Perdue's well-established Women and Money Conference. Women and men from all over the state traveled to Tamarack and Beckley to hear from some of the leading experts in money management. Here's more.
How are you, ma'am? Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you all.
West Virginia State Treasurer John Perdue is making sure these women know the importance of managing their money wisely. That's why he's hosting this Women and Money Conference at Tamarack and Beckley.
I thank him for sending his people around to the sites to talk to the seniors, because they really need this, and I wish we could have more.
The Treasurer started the conference series back in 2002. Since then, he's sponsored 27 of the events at locations around West Virginia.
We've reached out to thousands and thousands of women and men around the great state to help them with their finances.
Now the Treasurer is expanding and updating the conference agenda with new speakers and a partnership with AARP.
We brought a group of seniors over today from Wyoming County, and so far this morning we've heard about the new programs that Treasurer Perdue is having, and then we also learned how to be a fraud fighter and to ask questions so that way we can be a safe investor.
Women of all ages heard from top experts in finance, advanced planning, and consumer issues. During the seminar, one of the Treasurer's other programs received some recognition. State Farm Insurance presented Treasurer Perdue and the Education Foundation with $20,000 to go toward the Treasurer's Net Worth program and his efforts to get financial education into all schools around the state. Treasurer Perdue says all these educational opportunities will help West Virginians take charge of their lives and to learn the basics of financial freedom. When you talk about financial freedom, there are some staggering statistics when it comes to West Virginia's situation. A brand new survey suggests that only 36% of West Virginians are spending less than their annual income. That's compared to the national average of about 42%. With such a financial strain on local people, events like Money Smart Week are designed to help people learn to better manage their finances and develop good financial habits. Making good choices about saving, giving, spending, and investing. That's what the first Money Smart Week West Virginia is all about. Hundreds of people showed up at the Charleston Civic Center recently to take advantage of free classes designed to help them better manage their personal finances.
And I just thought, well, there's probably something I could learn, so came over here to see what it was about.
The Treasurer's Office joined up with other governmental agencies, AARP, and many additional sponsors to offer the day-long educational summit. It's a collaborative effort to make sure people around West Virginia are making smart decisions about money. Those who attended say it works.
I learned how to read my credit report and what everything meant on there and how to look at it and how to improve the score.
The event featured expert speakers from around the nation, and people of all different backgrounds cashed in. Following the seminars, a financial wellness clinic out in the lobby allowed people to learn about services and opportunities available here locally. In fact, many people took advantage of State Treasurer John Perdue's unclaimed property display by participating in an interactive search for their lost money or belongings. For more information on unclaimed property or any of the resources and information associated with the 2010 Money Smart Week West Virginia, log on to www.wvtreasury.com. And be sure to mark your calendars for next year's event. It will be held April 4th through the 9th. One of the national speakers at Money Smart Week recently sat down with us for an in-depth interview about outsmarting investment fraud. Coming up, we'll have more from that interview. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The primary function of the Treasurer's Office is cash management. People don't realize that we are the largest bank in the state of West Virginia. People have no idea how much money comes through the Treasurer's Office, over $13 billion now. I pride myself in being the best state in managing money in the nation. I'm the banker of state government. We are your bank. We take care of your money.
Welcome back to Treasury Notes, a show designed to update you on the latest news and information from the office of West Virginia State Treasurer John Perdue. I'm your host, Gina Long. The Treasurer is committed to educating all West Virginians about better money management. And for even the experienced investors, it's easy to make mistakes. But there are ways you can protect yourself. You need to be able to outsmart investment fraud. John Gannon is the president of FINRA's Investor Education Foundation. FINRA is the largest independent regulator for all securities firms doing business in the United States. As president of FINRA's Investor Education Foundation, Gannon helps provide Americans with the knowledge, skills, and tools necessary for financial success. I recently sat down with Mr. Gannon for a discussion about investment fraud. Here's more from our recent conversation. Let's start off just by talking about FINRA and what FINRA is and what its mission is.
Oh, thanks, Gina. FINRA is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and we are a private sector regulator that regulates every broker and brokerage firm in the country. So that means we regulate approximately 5,000 brokerage firms and over about 500,000 individuals, what we call registered reps or stockbrokers. And by regulation, that means we write the rules that they have to comply with. We examine brokerage firms to make sure that they're complying with our rules and regulations. And when they don't, we have an enforcement department which can bring enforcement actions against individuals or firms, which can be anything from a fine to a suspension from the industry, or in the worst cases, a bar from the industry.
Can you give me some background about FINRA, why it was created, and why we are where we are today?
Sure. FINRA actually was created back in the 1930s as part of the response to the stock market crash of 1929 under the federal securities laws. The federal securities laws created a rule that required every brokerage firm to be a member of what's called an SRO, or a self-regulatory organization, which is what FINRA is today. Up until 2007, we used to be called NASD, which I think most people are much more familiar with, or the National Association of Securities Dealers. But when we took over a part of the New York Stock Exchange regulatory responsibilities, we changed our name to FINRA.
Now, FINRA actually has a section of the organization that is really dedicated to educating the public.
Yeah, that's right, Gina. We feel that investor education is one of the best forms of investor protection out there. So as part of our overall regulatory mission, we try to educate people about issues and problems that occur in the industry and warn people when we see things through our regulatory work that they should be aware of and try to avoid.
And really, with investment fraud, I mean, there's a wide variety of things that I'm sure you have to tackle on a daily basis. But the big thing now is with the whole Bernie Madoff scheme, everybody's really been talking about investment fraud and how they could become a victim very easily.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, I think, highlighted to many Americans investment fraud. What people may not realize from that case, which involved a lot of wealthy individuals and actually institutional investors who got taken by Bernie Madoff, is that there are many, many Madoffs going around the country. So if you have a retirement plan, a home with equity in it, cash value in a life insurance policy, you're potentially a potential victim of investment fraud. It doesn't have to be somebody as high-flying as Bernie Madoff that will take your money. And that's why seniors especially have to be careful, because they've saved up these assets. You know, they probably have a good retirement account balance. They probably have a lot of equity in their home. And they may have other assets that somebody who wants to take their money will go after.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who plays the stock market, so to speak, or someone who's an active investor, although those people are victims too.
Yes, they are. We did a lot of research as we developed our, what we call our Outsmarting Investment Fraud program. And one of the things that we looked at was who is the typical victim of investment fraud. Now, most people think it's the little old widow sitting at home alone who gets the cold call from some slick-talking guy and falls for it. But that's not what our research showed with respect to investment fraud. That may be true for some other types of financial fraud, but for investment fraud, the typical victim is 55 to 65 years of age, male, college educated, high income, financially literate, which surprises a lot of people, and they have a couple of weaknesses. They've had a recent health or financial crisis in their family. They typically are self-reliant, which means they don't seek a second opinion from a lawyer, an accountant, a long-time financial professional that they've worked with. And they tend to be overly optimistic. In other words, the glass half full types, you know, who may be a little too willing to believe some promises that some of these fraudsters make.
Do some legitimate businesses actually use these techniques as well to try and get people to I guess, invest with them?
Yeah, yes, they do. And I mean, you know, one of the other pieces of research we looked at was what are all these tactics that fraudsters use? Can we identify common tactics to every type of investment fraud? Because we're hoping that if you could do that, then you could develop a program that regardless of what the fraud du jour is today, we could develop a program to help insulate people from investment fraud. So we did find a number of what we call persuasion or influence tactics that fraudsters use. These are used both by legitimate as well as illegitimate financial professionals. In fact, they're used everywhere. I mean, one of our tactics is called source credibility, which is if everybody's doing it, it has to be okay. Well, you know those golden arches? What's their slogan? Billions and billions sold. That's source credibility at work in a very legitimate way. However, it can be used by illegitimate people, and that's where you have to be careful. And what we've learned through our research is that if you tell people what these influence or persuasion tactics are, they can step back from the emotion that these things are trying to drive you to get involved in. That's what they're trying to do. And that's why smart people can fall for investment fraud, because you're not making a decision with your head. You're making an emotional decision with your heart. That's what the fraudster wants you to do, and that's what these tactics are designed to do.
And I think that's what's so scary to people is that the same tactics that are being used by legitimate businesses are also being used by the criminals out there, by the people who want to scam you. So the real question is, how do you separate the two? How do you take that step back? And once you step back, how do you differentiate between what's good and what's bad?
Well, if you step back, the most important thing that you can do is ask a lot of questions and then verify the information. And in the investing world, the two most important questions you can ask is, are you licensed? Which means is the individual that's selling you the financial product licensed? Because that's very easy to verify. And the second question, is the product registered? Most securities have to be registered with the United States Securities Commission. Some don't, but you need to be even careful of those, because some of them, even though they appear legitimate, can be fraudulent.
And do you really have have a grasp on, we were talking earlier about Bernie Madoff and that this could really be anybody, but do you really have a grasp on how big of a problem this is, these schemes?
It's very difficult to identify how large the problem is. We did some research back as we started to develop our program and asked a lot of victims of investment fraud. These were known victims, whether they had reported the fraud to anyone. And 80% of those said that they had not reported it to anyone. So while we're aware of Bernie Madoff and many other Ponzi schemes and other types of investment fraud that go around the country, what concerns us, and one of the reasons we're trying to educate investors about financial fraud, is to get more people to be able to identify it and hopefully then report it.
Talking about reporting it, where should people report this kind of fraud?
Well, one of the best places here in West Virginia is the State Auditor's Office, which regulates securities. So they're a place to go to. Obviously, FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, if it involves a broker or a brokerage firm, they can go there. Also, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. I mean, there's a number of places that you can go to report the fraud. What's important is, even if you see the fraud and understand it, it's important to tip off regulators, because there's probably someone down the street, a coworker or somebody else, who may get taken.
What are some of the common types of investment fraud? A lot of people have been hearing about Ponzi schemes in the news lately.
Well, Ponzi scheme is a very common type of fraud. What that usually means is that there will be some sort of pitch which is trying to get investors to invest their money. As more and more investors invest money, they use some of the new money that they receive to pay off some of the older investors. The problem is, as you can imagine, at some point they're going to run out of being able to find new investors, and then the Ponzi scheme typically falls apart. And that's what's happened in this economic downturn that we've just been through, is it was becoming more and more difficult to find new investors. So many of these Ponzi schemes have recently blown up.
And that really brings up another good point. Are people just running scared right now? Are people so scared to invest their money that they're not doing it?
Well, yeah. Have we seen people exit the stock market? Yes. And we've seen people exit the stock market, and we've seen people going into the bond market. But fraudsters are smart too. One of the most recent enforcement cases that the United States Securities and Exchange brought was a case called SEC versus McLeod down in Jacksonville, Florida. And that involved a very conservative investment. It was a U.S. bond fund. The fraudster was guaranteeing a 13% return on a fund that purportedly only invested in U.S. Treasuries. Now, the first thing people should have been wary of is, if anybody knows what the interest rate climate is today, how can you get a 13% return on an investment that only invests in treasuries, which are very safe and conservative, but have very, very low interest rates? That should have been a tip-off for people, but they bought into it and unfortunately got defrauded. And many of these investors in the SEC versus McLeod case were federal law enforcement employees. These should have been people that are wary and understand fraud.
Mr. Gannon, I asked you, if people are scared, but I guess the next question really is, should people be scared to invest?
I don't think people should be scared to invest. I think people need to do their homework and make sure that they're asking questions about investments and then verifying that information. One of the things that was troubling about the Madoff case is, if you read many of the reports in interviews with investors who invested in the Madoff Ponzi scheme, most of them really had no idea what they're investing in. And that's a mistake any investor can make, whether it's a legitimate investment you're making or an illegitimate one. You should always understand what you're investing in. And if you don't, you should walk away.
I think that's probably a lot of the problem, is a lot of people are scared that maybe they're not educated enough to invest. So what are some tips that maybe you can offer people?
Well, I mean, if you're new to investing or don't have a lot of money, there are very simple investment products out there, such as mutual funds and exchange-traded funds. These are registered, highly regulated products. As long as you try to keep it simple, you typically won't get into a lot of trouble. It's when you start chasing return and getting into products that aren't regulated and aren't registered, that you tend to get in trouble. And that's what happened in the Madoff case, in this SEC versus McLeod case. Both of those products were unregistered. If people had just taken one simple step, which was to contact the United States Securities and Exchange Commission to verify the registration of those products, they would have found they weren't, and that might have been a big red flag for them.
And that's all they have to do.
Simple, they can go to the SEC's website, www.sec.gov, or they can even call the SEC, and you can find that number on their website. They can call FINRA, or go to FINRA's website to find out if somebody's licensed as a broker. I mean, we're talking a very small amount of time to actually verify this information. It's just most people don't know to make those steps, but they can be really critical in the difference between investing in something that might be fraudulent and something that may be totally legitimate. And I think it's really worth the time to do that.
More and more people are starting to retire. When's a good time to invest?
Well, I mean, most people need to think about investing for retirement, whether you're 20, 40, or 60, because most of us no longer have pensions and are going to have to work through an employer-sponsored retirement plan, which is usually a defined contribution plan, where you're contributing money out of your paycheck and choosing how to invest that. So at a minimum, many people are investing through their employer. And so they need to be savvy about what their investment options are there. And if they have other savings, they should consider what to do with those. Obviously, it's important to have some emergency savings for an emergency. But for money beyond that, it's good to consider investing. And just be careful. Don't follow the herd. A lot of people are investing in bonds now. People need to remember that at some point, interest rates will probably go up, and that could have a negative impact on bonds.
Any final thoughts or final messages as we sit here today?
Well, I would just encourage people to learn as much as they can about investment fraud so they can detect it when they see it. It's not something that may hit you or call you every day, but if you know what to look for, you can. And we've developed a program, Outsmarting Investment Fraud, to do that. We have a website, saveandinvest.org, where people can go to get information. We actually have a documentary that goes through and teaches people these persuasion tactics and the risks they may be taking with their money and how to ask and check. And they can order a DVD of that documentary at that website.
All right. John Gannon with FINRA, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Gina.
And I want to once again thank Mr. Gannon with FINRA for taking the time to talk more about investment fraud. During today's show, we've talked a lot about money management, but good money management starts at an early age. That's why State Treasurer John Perdue's Net Worth program in schools is working. Here to talk more about some of the activities going on in the classroom is Nancy Francis with the Treasurer's Office. Thanks for joining us here today, Nancy.
Well, thank you, Gina, for inviting me.
This Net Worth program is really taking off this year. It's in a lot of the classrooms already, and there are a lot of supplemental activities that are going on with the classroom work as well. One of those is the Get a Life simulation, and you've recently been to quite a few of these.
It is. The Net Worth program itself is a standalone curriculum. It's integrated into the classrooms from kindergarten through high school, and that's presenting financial literacy and education components. But the wonderful thing that the Treasurer's Office is highlighting is the Get a Life game, and this is an activity for middle school students, and our goal is to reach every county this year for at least one Get a Life game. We were recently at Horace Mann Middle School here in the Kanawha County, and this past Friday we were at Trap Hill Middle School in Beckley. It's a terrific game. It's a simulation of life. You have a checkbook, a ledger sheet, and 11 tabletop booths you must visit. And these are everything from purchasing a home within your budget income, a car, the utilities, the bedroom furniture, and of course the grocery store is well represented. But it's an idea that visit these places, and you're not told. The description card that each young person receives says that you are now 27 years old and this is your job. Tells how much your monthly income will be, whether the statistics on your family, if you're divorced, if you're single, how many children are in your household, and your job description. Well, the red card that each child starts with is a high school or high school equivalency card. So there are 27 trying to make it. Some jobs are better than others. For instance, not all children are geared to a college education. It's to inform a child that there are other plans or avenues to better your education. So where you might have the first card as an assistant welder, when they go back for further education, which is their whole out, when they find they're bankrupt because they bought lovely, lovely automobiles and homes the first time around. So the education in the game is after you play the game the first time, and many go bankrupt immediately. Yeah. We asked this lovely little gal at Trap Hill Middle School. She came to me. We have the calculator table as well. And I said, what kind of car did you purchase? Because her income was $1,600 and her car payment was $14,000.
Wow.
She got the largest Mercedes on the lot. But that's what she would aspire to someday. So her education is going to need to match her wants.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about this program is that you go through this simulation just like you would in real life where you have to budget yourself, but then they have the option to see what a higher education of some sort can do for them. It increases their monthly salary, and they really see what those better jobs pay and how that will translate into their everyday living and what kind of cars they can buy, as you said, what kind of homes they can buy. But you've been working with this program and the Get a Life simulation for over a year now.
We have.
Talk a little bit about what the reaction is from these students when they're in this game.
Well, they're wonderful. First of all, oftentimes the young person will not be happy about their first job. But I'm going to college. I'm not going to be a secretary or a dental hygienist assistant, not even. So when they have shopped, and also it is interesting that some students already are very much aware of their needs and wants. And when they purchase the car, even on their pipe fitter or secretary salary, they purchased a used car. They purchased a small home that would meet their needs. But halfway through the game, they get to play it a second time, and that card correlates to a further education card. So they go back to college, or they have continuing ed through other sources. And their second card, they have a higher education and a higher pay grade. There are all evaluations of the pay grade, for there might be a $6,000 a month doctor's income, and there is still a $1,500 a month job description, even with a college education. Not every job is equal in pay. But the second time around, their values have changed, what they want from each of these homes, cars, gasoline to put in the car. We also hear very funny comments. They're not happy about their lot in life. They're going to choose spouses better as well.
Sure. Well, that's why they call it the Get a Life game, I guess. Nancy Francis, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
And to find more about our Get a Life game and that simulation and the net worth program, of course, you can just log on to our website for a complete calendar. That wraps up today's show. Remember, again, you can always get the very latest news and information from the State Treasurer's Office at www.wvtreasury.com. I want to thank Nancy Francis. I also want to thank John Gannon from FINRA for being a part of today's discussion.